Hello, everyone, and welcome back if you were here last week. So, after Inanna heard the call, she and us are ready to continue the journey. So, are you ready? And what does it even mean to be ready? When Pam was talking about the call last week, I had this image of from Frozen 2, where Elsa was hearing the call, and for her, the call was actually an audio call. She could hear it was, and she refused it. She ignored it. She thought she was imagining it. She thought she was hearing voices, but it persisted and persisted and persisted. It just appeared in her dreams, and then it just seemed to come out of the walls and everywhere till she had no choice but to choose to go to the journey. So that made me think of when we are ready to go on the journey, we have a feeling that we know who we are. We have a feeling that we know who is the one who's embarking on this journey. We have a feeling that we chose it. But did we? Do we? Maybe it's kind of a choiceless choice. So the other day we were talking in one of the classes about being ready, and somebody said that she wasn't ready for this COVID-19 pandemic. And who can be ready? I mean, nobody knew that it's coming now. Nobody knew that it's going to look as it looks. I remember that when it started, I kept finding myself saying, no, it's not possible that blah, 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 blah. And then 2 days later or 2 hours later, it seemed that it is possible. So it really caught everybody by surprise. And we all, or most of us, feel really not ready. On the other hand, as Pam pointed out, everything in our lives, my life, your life, everybody's life, prepared us unconsciously to this moment. So for each journey, there is unconscious preparation and conscious preparation. And the unconscious preparation really began when we began. Everything that we gathered when we grew up as kids, everything we learned about the world, about illness, about health, about family, about support, about communication, the assumptions we've made, everything that we're carrying within us without even knowing that we're doing that. Sometimes we only realized how we prepared while we were already deep, deep, deep in the ordeal. Only then we realized, oh, that thing in my life actually prepared me, gave me tools or skills or an understanding that is now beneficial and helpful. So you can look back at your life. What in your life did prepare you? So when Inanna is ready, she starts to collect everything that she believes she needs for this journey. And in the myth, it's called, she's collecting her me or May or Maida. And in the Sumerian culture is really traits or attributes of the gods. You know how in the Indian mythology, they depict the goddesses, the different gods and goddesses, always with some objects around them, like Saraswati, which is the goddess of wisdom. She has a swan. And Durga, she has a tiger. And they're always holding things in their hands, and they have multiple hands, so they're holding an object in each hand. It's like physical representations of something that is not physical. So when Inanna is gathering her Maida, she's really gathering all her traits and attributes that make her the queen she is, that make her the goddess she is. But you know, because you've heard a bit of the continuation of the story, that as Inanna goes down through the gates of the underworld, Pitu takes away what she thinks is hers, what she thinks is her. But at that point of the story, she doesn't know that. So she takes the beautiful tall crown and puts it on her head. And she wraps herself with her royal gown. And she puts her bracelets that every time she can hear their sound, it reminds her of her strength, of her authority. She takes her measuring rod and she holds it in her hand. She puts on her chest, she puts her breastplate that says, "Come, men, come." She puts her necklace of lapis lazuli beads that's been going from mother to daughter in her family for ages and ages and ages. She really collects everything that she believes would help her. Here's the way. It's a translation of the Sumerian text. My lady, you are the guardian of the great divine powers. You have taken up the divine powers. You have hung the divine powers from your hand. You have gathered up the divine powers. You have clasped the divine powers to your breast. And when Inanna has all those objects on her, she truly believes she's ready. And maybe we have to when we embark on a journey. Maybe we've got to be in our innocent to leave home. But we know that she's going to find out differently. So I want to read you an Adyashanti's quote where he says, without any connection to Inanna, but with connection to what we're talking about, we realize, sometimes quite suddenly, that our sense of self, which has been formed and constructed out of our ideas, beliefs, and images, is not really who we are. It doesn't define us. It has no center. So when we decide what to take with us to the underworld, we do it according to what we think we are, who we think we are, and what we know in our lives in the upper world. But life in the underworld is different. You know, when I thought about it, something ridiculous, how we all over the world, people were looking for toilet paper and like buying a lot of toilet paper in the beginning of the pandemic. And I was like, what's this thing with the toilet paper? And it's something about how we imagine things might be in the underworld and what we might need there. I don't think anybody really needs toilet paper in the underworld of COVID-19, but somehow it made us feel like more secure or protected. And I also had this funny incident myself with eggs. I don't know if it was like that for you also around the world, but in Israel there was not enough eggs. So I found myself going to the little shop that is near my house to look for eggs. And every time I came, he said, there'll be eggs in 2 hours. So I came 2 hours later. He said, there'll be eggs in 2 hours. I said, came 2 hours later. Sorry, there'll be eggs in 2 hours. I went 5 times. And when I finally got those eggs, I was standing at the entrance to my house and a thought came through my head and I was like, why did I think I really needed those eggs? The eggs are just a representation of not having something that is basic, that I'm used to having, that I feel that it's a part of my routine, regular life, that I know, that I can rely on, that I have the illusion that are going to be like that always. But something comes along in our lives. Sometimes it's something like apparently COVID-19, sometimes it's birth, and shakes this illusion. So we can't just go on holding to it as if nothing happened. And what we choose to take has to do with what we're thinking we're leaving behind. So this brings us to the temples. After Inanna has all her Meda, so she realizes that she needs to say goodbye to each and every one of her temples. And each and every temple is like a bustling city, full of life, full of activity, full of people that adore Inanna as the queen she is. And she has to leave all that behind. And she goes through the different temples. And in each temple, she performs a ceremony. In some temples, maybe she's almost relieved not to be the queen of that temple for a while. Some temples are a little harder. It makes her heart ache. Maybe she has to stop there and take a deep breath. And some temples that Inanna has to leave behind are just tearing her heart apart. She has to do such a long ceremony there. It maybe takes a day and a night and another day till she can finally say yes to leaving them behind. So what is it that you're leaving behind that you didn't want to? And what is maybe a relief? I've heard so many people say that this time at home created an opportunity. What temples feel like it's part of who you are and you can't leave them behind? It's just, it won't be me. If I leave that behind, it won't be me. You remember in Inside Out, the Pixar movie? There's another hero's journey there of the girl growing up. She's a teenager. And there's, instead of temples, what represents her identity there are islands. There's the island of her family. There's an island of friends. There's an island of, um, actually, there's an island of honesty, and there's an island of hockey because she used to be a hockey player. All parts of who she believes she is. And during her adolescence journey, the bridges between her and that island collapse, and with it, the island itself. And the journey is about leaving those temples behind without knowing if she's going to come back to them or not. So, this is part of what makes it so hard. We don't know if it's temporary. And we are not just leaving temples that are outside of us, we are leaving internal temples. We are leaving temples that of our own identity. And we don't know if when this ordeal is over, they're going to be there. Because we believe our identity is a fixed thing, we don't want it to change. Or if we want it to change, we want it to change in a way that we choose and that we control. So there's so many temples that are left behind. The temple of control is definitely one of them. This idea of holding on to who I am made me think of this quote from the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, which probably is pronounced differently in English, that says, it's a famous quote saying, no man ever steps into the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he is not the same man. So when we leave our kingdom of the upper world into an internal journey into the underworld, it is us who are going to change. So it's not just the world that is changing, it's us. And that is part of what's creating that strong effect of a journey into the underworld, because it's an internal as well as an external change, just like a birth. Just like really change is inevitable and everything is changing. The Buddhist called it anicca. Whether you want it or you don't want it, there is constant change. Sometimes we want it, and then when it comes, it's still frightening. Sometimes even something that we really wanted, that we really did everything to get to, is still frightening when it happens, when it's an internal deep change. But if it's not something we chose, if we feel like we are thrown into this. So I was thinking of the different temples that are being left behind in this COVID-19 pandemic. I thought about the temple of touching and hugging each other. I don't know about other parts of the world, but Israelis tend to touch a lot and hug a lot. And this is a really big thing, not being able to do it. Or the temple of freedom. They tell us we can only get out of the house for very specific needs and for very specific distance. This is such a huge temple for us modern people, being able to fly to New Mexico, to fly to Israel, to Italy, to everywhere, whenever we want. And there's the temple of control. Did we ever have control? Or was it always an illusion? That's a huge one, right? The temple of control. I was thinking about it as being in control versus feeling in control. When we want to make ourselves feel confident, we say to each other, to ourselves and to each other, don't worry, everything's going to be all right. Everything's going to be fine. Everything is under control. This is such a huge temple for us to let go of. There's a Zen quote that actually says the opposite. It says, relax, nothing is under control. And first time I've heard it, something in me really relaxed. I use it a lot in birth story medicine sessions because our Western mind is used to equate no control with something horrible happening. But is it so? Or is no control just means life is doing life? Some things are what we want and some things are really what we don't want. You know that in Hebrew, I was telling Pam that in Hebrew, the word for it will be okay, it will be fine is beseder, yeh beseder. And the word for order, everything is in order, is also beseder. So like, it's as if we are telling each other everything will be fine. We are telling each other everything will be in order. I find that really interesting that it's the same word for us. Chaos seems like everything's not going to be fine. But is it true? Is it even true? So here's another Adi quote that relates to that. When you get out of the driver's seat, you find that life can drive itself. That actually life has always been driving itself. When you get out of the driver's seat, it can drive itself so much easier. It can flow in ways you never imagined. Life becomes almost magical. The illusion of the me is no longer in the way. Life begins to flow, and you never know where it will take you. So maybe it's more about saying yes to the inevitable, saying yes to those temples being left behind, whether I want to leave them or not, whether I am relieved about it or totally anxious, but realizing that this is happening anyway, with me saying yes or no. But by saying yes to it, by just stepping out of the driver's seat and surrendering to what is, something else happens. So maybe we can use our coming together also for that, to see if we can leave the temples behind mindfully. Just realize what temples are being left behind. Maybe even create a little ceremony for yourself, telling yourself this is a temple that is being left behind now. Our getting together and talking about Inanna in our live calls are a ceremony in itself. You can actually make a painting of a temple you're leaving behind. A temple that you think is part of who you are, part of what your life is. You know, sometimes the closest temple to our hearts, we don't even realize it's a temple. We are so sure that this is who we are that we don't realize that this is something we will continue to exist, who we really are. We'll continue to exist even without it. We are so identified with it that we don't see it as a separate temple. So you can also ask yourself, what's that for me? What's a temple that is so close to me, so much a part of who I think I am? So I thought I'll end with a quote. It's a Meryl Streep quote. It's actually quoted in An Ancient Map for Modern Birth. It's from a speech she delivered in a college in 2010. I'll read you her quote and then I'll add a little thing to it that would make it even more relevant, I think, to us. Meryl Streep said like this is your time and it feels normal to you. But really there is no normal. There's only change and resistance to it and then more change. But since we live in a time that feels not so normal, I think we can also just add the not and say, this is your time and it feels not normal to you. But really, there is no normal. There's only change and resistance to it and then more change. So bring your art and thoughts and reflections to our call, to our live call this coming Sunday. And we'll continue talking about this phase of the journey. See you there.